Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Derek and Cody, back for another episode, guys. And we are continuing right along in our series, diving into each of the position groups for the Indianapolis Colts heading up to the 2023 season. We are a couple weeks away from the start of training camp. And so with that, we're going to talk about a position, Derek, that got a little bit of a makeover in some ways. It's kind of an interesting position, the wide receivers. You know, you had two guys, really three guys that are probably going to play significant parts of this roster in certain ways that are coming back from last year. You added a couple guys. You obviously lost a guy in free agency as well. Let's talk about the wide receiver position, Derek, because it's a very interesting position, a pretty young position, all things considered. And lots of talent, and there's a lot of investment the Colts have had. It feels like from 2020 till now, the Colts have invested, multiple decent round picks, second, third round picks into this group. And I think for the first time, Derek, as I look at this group, I kind of see a group that has, I think, a little bit more multifaceted in the things that they like to do as opposed to years past, right? You have the bigger wide receivers, the guys that can go up, make the 50-50 jump balls. You have the guys that can, help with the speed factor, the separation factor. That was something you really struggled in last year. But Derek, talk to me about just this wide receiver room looking into the 2023 season. You have a new quarterback, you have a new offensive play caller. You have a lot of new things. You have a couple new pieces. So talk to me about this position group and kind of some of the things that have happened from where it was last year to where it is hopefully coming into this year.
Well, it definitely, I would agree with you, probably is the most interesting group right now because there's a lot of different things going into it this year. Like you mentioned, there's new offensive coordinators calling things and working things out. You added new talent to this group in Isaiah McKenzie, Josh Downs, who you drafted, and Rashad Perryman, who you've also gotten in free agency. So you've invested a little bit more time into getting this group where you're at, but still, Ballard continues to remind people that he feels confident in the wide receivers he's drafted and moving forward. So, I mean, I don't know if you saw it, Cody, but I remember seeing Dustin Adams bring up a tweet the other day that said that he had talked with somebody within the organization and that there's a certain wide receiver who has, really been stepping up and has been doing a lot of really great things this offseason, and he's going to really shock people for as good as he has gotten over the offseason. And that wide receiver in question was second-year wide receiver Alec Pierce. So it's an interesting concept. Hopefully in training camp, we'll see a little bit of that, improvement that we are being told that he's displaying. But this is an interesting group, Cody, because last year, the wide receiver group, for the most part of the year, Cody, was, one of the best things about this team. Ironically enough, I mean, it was the best thing about this whole offense for the majority of the year. Even when, we were having issues with Michael Pittman at the end of the year, guys like Alec Pierce were really stepping up last year. The numbers weren't necessarily amazing for Alec Pierce in his first year, but Alec Pierce was a big contributor in a lot of those games last year. Alec Pierce was at the forefront of a lot of those comeback wins for the Indianapolis Colts last year, and that's something to be admired. Just ultimately, what do you think is going to happen with this team and this wide receiver core moving forward? But I mean, all in all, I think most Colts fans are willing to accept that last year was just a result of really bad play calling and really bad play design and really bad quarterback play. And that could really help shroom up, sort of the ill-advised concepts that were being ran by this wide receiver group last year.
You mentioned Alec Pierce. I wanted to kind of touch on him real fast. I did an article probably been about a month ago or so, kind of regarding like some players who I think it was players who will thrive or whatever in the Indianapolis Colts system. Alec Pierce is one of those guys. And for the reason because, he was clearly far and away your best receiver in terms of vertical threat, plays 20 plus yards down the field, things of that nature. He really thrived on the 50-50 deep ball, kind of those type of plays. And, ironically enough, it's crazy because Shane Steichen's system, the things he's run in Philadelphia, in different places that he's been, when he's called plays, his offense has been, or I guess his quarterback has been top 10 about, I think it was every single year in chunk yardage, 20 plus yard plays. So that is, fits like a glove into what Alec Pierce's game is. And so I do think he is due for a big year. There was one point in the season, Derek, where Alec Pierce was on pace to actually break the Colts rookie receiving record, a few games in. And that was with a few games where he barely got targeted at all. So Alec Pierce, while there was some inconsistencies, there certainly was some things he needed to clean up, more of I think it was the separation. Like he was one of, if not the worst wide receiver last year to do so. But he made up for it, with his big playability down the field. Obviously we talk about that Jacksonville game that he won for you, and I thought he had some nice moments as well where he didn't look like a rookie. Definitely felt like he got better as the season went on. When he was targeted, he got more confidence, and that's going to be huge going into year number 2. It's funny. I feel like I've heard different people, even local media, say that like Anthony Richardson's not going to have, a lot of help. Has a lot of talent. I got to just scratch my head at that because I'm like, what are you talking about? Like the Colts have literally invested so much in this talent, right? And just because it's not proven talent doesn't mean it's not talent. Like there is talent here, right? You talk about Pierce, you talk about Downs, you talk about McKenzie, you talk about Pittman. Like there's a lot of investment here. Just because you don't have that Jamar Chase type of player doesn't mean you have a bad, skill group. I think it's kind of like some people think it's that way, but I just really don't. I think it's a young core, a young group that has some I think, pretty decent upside.
And Alec Pierce, remember, the upside is one thing. Remember, the first game for Alec Pierce ended up, dropping 2 touchdown passes in that first game against Houston. He had a really bad first game and then didn't even get targeted in the second game against Jacksonville. And then sure enough, week 3, he went out there and, made some key catches down the field against the Kansas City Chiefs. The Denver Broncos game, he had 8 catches for 80 yards, 3 of them on the last drive to some circus catches to make it to where the Colts could move down the field to score the game-winning field goal. And then, like you said, with the Jacksonville game, he had the game-winning touchdown against Dallas. If it wasn't for the fact that the entire team just forgot how to play football, Alec Pierce was putting up freaking numbers, man. That man had 3 catches for 110 yards and two touchdowns. He was putting up numbers before the team just forgot to throw the football his direction. And yeah, you're right. It was kind of funny too, because for someone who is, I remember what the word was about him, Cody, last year. He was insanely unpolished right now. He was not polished last year. He's a guy that mostly ran go routes and was having difficulty creating separation from receivers. That was the knock on him. And yet those were the things that he was able to do with subpar quarterback play and a terrible coordinator. I would love to see what he can do with a better coordinator who knows how to get a guy like that open. And on top of it, a quarterback that can actually throw the ball 50, 60 yards down the field, where Alec Pierce, it thrives best, is going and getting that. And again, remember, he is athletic. This kid is a matchup nightmare for any corner that's guarding him. So it may not be great right off the bat, but Alec Pierce is going to be a good weapon for Anthony Richardson because he fits exactly what Anthony Richardson needs from someone, as a deep threat guy that just says he could be the next Jamar Chase for Anthony Richardson, a guy that will just go get the 50-50 ball, man. Just give the confidence to go and get it. That's what Alec Pierce will do for you. And I mean, let's not act like Michael Pittman can't do the same thing. Cody, how many times did we see Michael Pittman moss people in 2021 when Carson Wentz was throwing the football to him? We saw him in Baltimore, moss dudes. We saw him in San Francisco, moss people. We saw him against Tennessee, moss people. Like, I mean, that was the thing. Michael Pittman in 2021 was that guy. He's able to do that same thing. It was just an issue of last year. The Colts didn't throw him the football more than 20 yards down the field. And that's just something that, again, Anthony Richardson can do that for you, because Anthony Richardson has to have that comfortability to just say, in a one-on-one matchup with these wide receivers down the field, having to have confidence in your 6'4" and 6'3" wide receivers who both have 40-inch verticals to go up and get the freaking football, because that's what the important thing is. So, I mean, playing to their strengths. And I think that you're right. Like, the talent is there. It's just how much more talent is Alec Pierce going to unlock this year? And is Michael Pittman going to return to form? Because that was the big question. Was this year, last year, Michael Pittman seemed kind of lost last year. I don't know if it was just because the offense just gave up, or he just lost confidence, or if he really took a step back and that 2021's the best we could get from him. I mean, it's truly a wonder of what Michael Pittman's going to be able to do.
I think you look at it, you say, okay, Pittman, he struggled for sure last year. It was not his finest year. There's no question about that. But also, yeah, I mean, you look at like who the Colts trotted out there at quarterback last year, and it's no wonder they didn't even have a single 1,000-yard receiver. I mean, they were throwing out random dudes at some point. Like, that's just what it was, And so I think it's amazing how, guys like Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman were able to even do what they did, last year, because it was just such a disaster in so many ways. I mean, people say Frank Reich's a good play caller, and I feel like I've been trash on him. He was awful last year. Just terrible. And, wasn't getting guys open, wasn't doing great things. And, he didn't have a quarterback that could do anything, even if he tried, even if he did draw up good plays. So it just was like, it was just all this huge disaster. And the fact that Alec Pierce was able to do what he did, and nearly have 600 yards receiving, I think a minor miracle in certain ways. Like, you're just like, wow, he actually, like, that's not bad for a rookie season, Like, that's not bad at all. So I kind of look at it and I say, Alec Pierce, really with, not really knowing the offense, not really knowing a whole lot, coming in, like you said, kind of unpolished from his time at Cincinnati. Like, I thought all in all, he played probably some of the best he could have played for, given that situation coming in last year. So I'm excited, like you said, to see him with an actual, like, legitimate offensive coordinator, like a Super Bowl caliber play caller, like just the things that they can unlock, the things that they can do. It's just things that you just didn't see the Colts give Alec Pierce opportunities to do last year, or Michael Pittman opportunities to do last year, right? Like, Pittman's proven it, obviously, a little bit more, having a couple more seasons under his belt. Like, so I just think yes, they need to play better. There's no question, especially Pittman. But, like, they just need to be given more opportunities to do what they do well, And I think if they do that, it's a great chance for both of them to really have a nice, I guess, bounce back season for Pittman and a good second season for Alec Pierce. And I just think these guys honestly have a chance to be a pretty good young duo in this league if they're used properly, which I think they have a good opportunity to be. But there's also other players as well, Derek. Like, this is a pretty deep group, right? And I'm glad I pulled up all the different players on this roster, because you mentioned different guys like Brashad Perriman. I kind of forgot about Brashad Perriman. Like, there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of diversity in terms of skill set on this roster, and I think that's a great thing for sure. You mentioned guys like Isaiah McKenzie, Josh Downs, more of those guys that are known a little bit more for their speed, known a little bit more for being shifty, and kind of being able to take advantage of things in the slot and things of that nature. And you obviously have a guy like Ashton Doolin who's coming back, who has shown when given snaps and when healthy, he can be a solid fill in for whenever you need him to. But I really think, Derek, top to bottom, when you look at this wide receiver core, there's a lot of unique skill sets and a lot of unique talent here that I think is going to serve well and honestly complement each other pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you talk about the newest addition in Josh Downs, and it's a kind of a unique player that's different than every other wide receiver that Chris Ballard has drafted before him, right? We're looking at his right when we were looking at the RAS score for Josh Downs. I mean, it was funny because he was a 8.99, and the only reason
He's a
why he was
9.99.
yeah, the
Oh,
only
wait, was he an
reason he
8?
wasn't the only reason he wasn't high was due to the fact that he's 5'9". I mean, that's
Yeah,
literally the
that's right.
only reason why he's like that. I mean, everything else, like from a measurable standpoint, Josh Downs does everything else right. And, even Reggie Wayne said, this guy I thought was the best wide receiver at the combine. I really love his game. And I think that, and obviously Steichen seems to think that he's a wide receiver that he can put in his offense and can find great things with. And obviously we know him and Anthony Richardson got some really good chemistry right off the bat because they were throwing the football to each other in the parking lot of the freaking hotel that they were staying at. So, I mean, this is a great collection of young talent. It is again one of those positions where the Colts just aren't investing a lot of high end guys into it right now. They're trying to build it through their own. And it's just going to be one of those things where do we know, is it going to pay off? And only time will tell when it comes to this unit.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do like that you have, especially like I think the Colts really saw last year that they really struggled, like I mentioned, from the wide receiver core in terms of separation, right? And they bring in two guys that can really offer that. Like Isaiah McKenzie was really, really good at that. And then obviously, Josh Downs is going to be probably pretty good at that as well, knowing him and just the ways that he's able to run and work. So yeah, I think it's good. It's good that the Colts are able to kind of change it up in that way. But you did lose Paris Campbell in the offseason. So, like, Derek, how do you envision the Colts? Because Paris Campbell, in his first really full season healthy, I thought he was probably one of the better receivers the Colts had last year. So how do you kind of fill that gap a little bit, right? Is there a single player that can do that? Do you have multiple players kind of play that role? Like, what are your thoughts on kind of how the Colts kind of fill the void that was left when Paris left in free agency?
Yeah, I would imagine that guys like Isaiah McKenzie and Josh Downs are going to have to, really fill that void. Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce, neither one of them really did a great job last season of creating separation. But yet, I mean, it felt like, Paris Campbell was the only guy that consistently was open. Like he wasn't just open, he was open. Like, I mean, I think they said at the end of the year, he was the 11th best wide receiver in the entire NFL at creating separation. And I mean, that's truly remarkable. And yet the fact that the Colts could not, take advantage of that is what's maddening to me. So I'm glad that we're going to get supposedly have a head coach in here now that is going to actually be able to understand that sort of concept and tell his quarterback to get the freaking ball to the guy that's open and not just, throw it to God knows who at any given point. So that would be great. And that's going to be the loss. I know a lot of people have given me a lot of grief and say like, oh, like Paris Campbell, he didn't do anything. Yeah, because nobody was throwing him the football. Again, if you threw the football to him more often than they did anybody else, the offense might have actually moved the ball a lot more efficiently last year because the guy was open and it just nobody threw the football to him. So hopefully now we'll be in a situation where, if the offense can, maybe get more yardage out of it, because I mean, we've seen Shane Steichen's offenses before take advantage of stuff like that. So that's all I hope. I hope Josh Downs and Isaiah McKenzie can fill that gap.
Yep. We shall see. It's going to be a fun kind of thing to watch in training camp, preseason, kind of see how the depth chart shakes out. I'm really looking forward to seeing that. Hopefully, Derek, we can get down to training camp to see that and be able to witness some of these guys in person. And yeah, if Alec Pierce is really, impressed the people the way he is, I'm excited to see what he can provide here in year number 2. And, at the end of the day, it's all about supporting that young quarterback, right? And I think the Colts have a unit that can help out that quarterback if it is Anthony Richardson starting week 1. So we'll see kind of what happens there, how they can utilize these different guys. And, hopefully it all works well and these guys can grow together. But let us know, guys, your thoughts on the wide receiver room. Lots of players, some players we didn't even talk about as well that honestly, Derek, they might not even make the roster, which is crazy to even think about, because they're guys that people, including us in certain ways, have been hyping up. Guys like, talk about Mike Strawn. We didn't even mention Mike Strawn. Like guys like that, that'll be interesting to see. Do they make the roster? Do they do something? I don't know yet. So we'll find out. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, guys, go Colts.